right. I think we're good to go now. So good morning, Mr. Leonard Korobkin, also known as Daddy. How are you? Happy Father's Day. How you feeling?
Same to you.
Thanks. How's everything in LA this morning?
It's June gloom, but otherwise beautiful.
And I'm sure it'll burn off by this afternoon and it'll be beautiful, right?
Yeah,
How was your Shabbos?
was very nice. And your Shabbos? Yeah, how did the service go?
It was good. It was the beginning. We just had an outdoor service in our chuppah garden. And so it was good. Okay. Anyway, Dad, we have a lot of people watching today. Are you able to hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Can I say hello to Mom for just a minute?
Yes.
Hi there. How are you?
This
Hi,
is
Mom.
Dad.
Thank you for facilitating the call today. I appreciate it.
Okay, my pleasure.
All right. If Daddy gets stuck, will you help him with some of the answers?
I don't know the questions and I don't know the answers.
All right. Well, Dad, this is an opportunity for us to talk about your experiences in fatherhood, raising your 3 kids, and now your grandkids and even your great-grandkids in sunny Southern California, but not only in Los Angeles, but also in the midst of your career over decades that span decades in the music industry. And there aren't that many Orthodox Jews who have done what you've done over the course of your career, working in the music business and a little bit in the film and television business as well. So before we get to your experiences in your career, I wanted to know if you could tell me a little bit about your upbringing, where you were born, what your father and what your mother were like. And we know that they were greeners, they were immigrants from the old country. And tell me about your relationship with them. Please go ahead, Dad.
Okay. Well, I was born at the beginning of the Depression in the US, but I never realized when I was a kid that times were bad. But we were always busy. My father had a wholesale business in confection and tobacco. He sold candy and cigarettes and so forth to retailers. They had candy stores in New York and stands in office buildings that he supplied. And the whole family worked in the business.
What do you mean by the whole family?
Well, I had an older brother, and he worked there part-time. I worked there part-time. Our mother worked part-time. My father worked time and a half.
And your father came from where?
My father was born in 1903 in a shtetl in the Ukraine called Nikolaev.
And you know, that's a very distinctive shtetl because the Lubavitcher Rebbe was also born there. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah.
This was a little shtetl.
I know.
There was a bigger city
Okay.
Ukraine.
All right.
Okay, which was a real city. This was just a little shtetl.
Okay.
In the event, my father had a tough life because when he was a kid, World War I started, the Russian Revolution started.
How did he get out?
What?
How did he get out?
Well, he had an older brother who left Nikolaev and went to Palestine in 1912. And from Palestine, this brother, Velvel, Uncle Willie, we called him, came to the States and settled in Lowell, Massachusetts. And he owned a service station for cars.
I remember you telling us that your father had to hide in a chest when the Cossacks came. Is there any truth to that story?
Well, I don't know if it was a chest. I think it was under a bed.
And and his parents were taken or murdered? What exactly happened?
I don't know when his parents died. I don't know what happened beyond that he was saved by hiding under a bed from a drunken Cossack who came into his room. Now, what the housing was there, I don't know. He never really described it.
All right. So,
it wasn't an apartment or a house that we in the States and Canada realized.
So tell me, your dad met your mom on the boat coming to America. She was from Poland, right?
And my dad had an older sister, and she was sent a ticket by Uncle Willie to come to the States. But then she became engaged and got married. So my father got the benefit of the ticket, and he came to New York. On board the ship, he met my mother. It was a shipboard romance. They got married after everybody settled in New York. And yeah, they lived in a building in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, with his aunt and cousins and their families.
Now, Dad, so you were brought up in New York City, and you went to public school and you went to public high school. Tell us about your Jewish upbringing. Was it a traditional home? What kind of home was it?
It was a traditional home. It was kosher, and Friday night my mother lit candles, but my father was not Shomer Shabbos. He worked on Shabbos. He had business. So,
but he sent you and Uncle Irving to Cheder, to Talmud Torah, right?
Yeah. Well, Uncle Irving went to Cheder in the Bronx. I went to the Cheder in Manhattan. We lived in Midtown Manhattan, which is now very fashionable. But at that time, there was we lived on 3rd Avenue. There was a 3rd Avenue L, elevated trains. There was trolley cars. There was an Irish named bar on every corner. And when you came home late at night, there was a drunk or two asleep in the lobby.
Did you have to learn how to defend yourself and know how to fight the neighborhood kids?
Well, only once in a while.
Okay.
Okay.
How many times did you break your nose in a fight?
Well, I didn't break my nose in a fight. I broke my nose a couple of times playing basketball.
Okay, so that was your NBA career, huh?
Yeah.
All right. So tell us, Dad. Tell us you had expressed an interest at a young age probably in going into entertainment. Do you want to talk to us about that?
Yeah, I like to tell jokes, and I played the piano, and I was usually the guy who did things at parties to entertain people, but it was a wish. But my parents insisted that I go to college and I go to graduate school.
Did you resent that initially?
No, because my brother, who was a genius, he graduated college when he was 19 and went into the Navy. It was 1944, just before the end of the war. And so he set an example for me. And I had gone to a very good high school, Stuyvesant High School, which was one of the top high schools in the city. There was Bronx Science, Brooklyn Tech, and Stuyvesant.
Were you involved in entertainment while you were in college?
Yes.
What did you do?
We did shows at the fraternity house, and I was also involved in entertainment, even in law school, with Saul Turtletaub, who later became a very well-known television writer and producer. We started the Columbia Law Review, spelled REVUE.
And the Columbia Law Review, that was like an entertainment group or comedians? What was it?
A show that we wrote and put on, which had music and sketches, comedy sketches.
So it was like a variety show. Very good. And you also, I remember you telling us that you also did some work in the Borscht Belt during that time.
Yes, well, that's every summer since I was 17. I went to work in the Catskills and in the Adirondacks. And
what did you do?
We were either waiters or busboys or tumblers.
What is a tumbler? For those who don't know what a tumbler is, can you explain that?
Yeah, that's someone who keeps everybody entertained during the day.
So what kind of stuff did you have to do as a tumbler?
You do calisthenics. You keep the guests happy.
Okay. And did you do? And you and Saul Turtletaub, you had a comedy bit where he was the funny man, you were the straight man. Is that how it worked?
Yeah. Well, we were both straight and we were both funny.
Do you remember any of the clean jokes from the routine?
Well, we did sketches. So there was one sketch that we did where I portrayed a cowboy with a Yiddish accent, and he was an Indian called Blood Brothers. He would cut my wrist, and then he would start talking, and I would do shtick about bleeding and getting weak, etc.
So Mel Brooks got that idea from you guys, huh?
I don't know if he got it from us.
I mean, his whole shtick from Blazing Saddles, he must have seen Saul do that, or maybe Saul told him about it. Because Saul was friendly with Mel Brooks, wasn't he?
I think he knew him, but I don't think they were that friendly.
All right. Okay. So let's go a little bit forward in your life. Now, when your parents saw that you were both going to law school, but that you were also tummeling and doing comedy. What did they think about that? These were immigrant Jews. Was this foreign to them? Were they supportive? I mean, how did they view this?
There was no pushback. Whatever I wanted to do, the upbringing was very loose with me. My brother got married when he came out of the service and moved away to Washington, where he had a job. And I was out either in the store working or out on the streets with friends. My parents were so occupied with the business and the home and so on.
All right, so
And
tell us how you met your lovely bride and how that changed the trajectory of your life.
well, my mother gave me a number that she had gotten from her first cousin. And I didn't call for 6-7 months. And my mother kept insisting, it's nagging me to keep calling. Well, I finally called. She lived not too far from me on the west side of Manhattan. I didn't have a car. She didn't have a car. So I finally made a date for a coffee.
And this was after you finished law school already?
Yes, I finished the service. I was out of the Army. I spent 2 years in the Army.
This was, you spent 2 years during the Korean War after law school, right?
Yeah.
And so actually university helped you get a deferral so that you didn't have to get shipped overseas, right?
Well, I could have been shipped overseas. I just wasn't.
All right, good. Anyway, so after you did your service for the Korean War,
Yeah.
and so your mother was nagging you?
Yeah, in 58.
Okay.
And I was trying to break into television. Saul was already working in television for Shari Lewis, writing her show. And I was trying to break in with very little success. So I got out of the service in November of 58. I sat for the bar and passed the bar in 59. And we met in March of 59. And we got married in February of 1960.
All right, now the two of you came from two very different worlds. You were a Yankee. You were born in New York City. You were raised in a traditional but not strictly Orthodox home. Mommy came from a rabbinic family. She was on the kinder transport. She's raised in London. Her whole family is Satmar Hasidim, and she, in a sense, she sort of departed from that kind of life, and she meets you. There must have been some kind of need to compromise in some way as far as the religious tone of your home. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I was a very spiritual guy. I loved Yiddishkeit. Still do. So for me, we were in love. Whatever is best. I promised her everything. So this was one of the promises.
And did you deliver? I think you did.
I think I did.
All right, that was pretty good. And what did she have to compromise on? It sounds like you did all the promising.
Well, she promised to take care of me.
I think she's held up her side of the bargain pretty well.
She never compromises anyone.
Okay. Dad, I wanted to ask you, so you were mentioning briefly that you were doing some television work. I know that when I was born, you were still doing writing for television. Were you practicing law at the beginning, or you were still, even though you had a law degree, you were still trying to break into the TV business?
In the beginning, I got a job with a legal publisher in Manhattan and was working on several publications that they put out.
But you were also working on some of your own creative material, right?
Yes. And then some people we had met in the Catskills offered me the opportunity to write a couple of cartoon shows.
I mean, like Saturday morning children's cartoon shows.
One was called The New Adventures of Pinocchio, and the other one was The New Adventures of the Wizard of Oz. And
was this with Rankin Bass, or was this a different company?
Bass, yeah.
Okay, just for those people who are watching, Rankin Bass are most famous for Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty the Snowman, those stop action animation that came out in the 60s, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you would actually go ahead, and in addition to writing for them some television shows, you also wrote a full-length motion picture for them, right?
Yes. Well, it didn't start out as a motion picture. It was supposed to be a television special. And you're talking about the Mad Monster Party, right?
That's right. Tell us about that film.
Well, Rankin approached me to do it. He told me the basic premise. This was a convention of all monsters that you've ever seen in the movies. And he told me he was going to have Boris Karloff in it and other known people from television and pictures.
Phyllis Diller.
Yeah,
What?
Phyllis Diller was in that picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Dad, so you wrote the screenplay together with Harvey Kurtzman, right?
Well, I never met Harvey Kurtzman. I don't know what he contributed. I wrote a television special for 78 minutes in length, which would be a 90-minute special for television.
And then they had to make it longer when they decided to release it into theaters because they had so much confidence in it.
Rankin made a deal with Joe Levine of Embassy Pictures to turn it into a theatrical release. So they had to be at least 90 minutes. So I went ahead, he gave me the chore of doing the extra 12 minutes, which I did. And one of the things that I'm proud about from that picture, you got to remember, this picture was being written in 1967. It wasn't released until 68. But one thing I'm proud about that picture is I created, to make it into a full-length picture, a couple of scenes that have been used in some of the big Disney pictures.
Ever since then, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
anyway, so I want to move forward. How did you transition away from Rankin Bass and writing for children's television and motion pictures and move into the music business?
The big money wasn't there. So I had to pursue the law. And mhm, I was having problems getting a job because I was Shomer Shabbos. And in New York, even the Jewish firms wanted you to work on Shabbos. In television, being Shomer Shabbos, in those days, you couldn't move ahead either.
But you
So,
did, you did have, there were very few people. I remember your friend Shimon Winselberg also had the same difficulty, but he tried to stick it out as long as he could in television, right?
well, he did, but it was hit and miss even with Shimon. And Shimon wrote plays, and he was, a dramatic writer. I was a comedy.
Right. So it was much more difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you decided, in other words, you needed to find the parnassa. So who hired you?
Well, I worked for a couple of law firms without success, and I spoke to the Columbia Law Placement Office if there was anything available in the entertainment industry. And they sent me to United Artists. And United Artists was founded by lawyers who had gone to Columbia. And in any event, I got the job. And
How long were you with United Artists?
I was with United Artists 3 years.
And anything memorable from that period with United Artists?
I was United Artists during that period was involved with James Bond, the Beatles, the Italian Westerns with Clint Eastwood. It was an exciting place. And they were the big sellers of soundtrack albums from these pictures.
Did you work in their music division?
Worked in their record and music publishing division and interfaced on the pictures because music was a big profit center of every motion picture.
Do you remember any particular experiences from that period? Any celebrities that you interacted with?
Celebrities from those pictures? No.
All right.
Recording artists I would interact with.
All right. So I'll talk to you about some of your more colorful recording artists. Let's move on. Was it from there that you transitioned to ABC?
No, I joined a law firm that specialized in the entertainment business and was with them for a couple of years. And then ABC reached out to me and made me an offer to be their general attorney of non-broadcasting.
So in those days, ABC had a music division, right?
Oh, they had a very thriving record label.
And was that known as ABC Dunhill initially?
Well, initially it was ABC. Dunhill came later on the West Coast.
All right, so tell us, it's around this time that you start your transition from the East Coast to the West Coast. Tell us how that happened.
That's because of Dunhill.
So Dunhill merged with ABC?
ABC bought Dunhill.
Which was a recording company, a music recording company?
A record production company, which ABC originally distributed. They had a big act called the Mamas and the Papas.
Okay.
And
Did you ever meet anyone from the Mamas and the Papas?
No, I never met the Mamas and the Papas, but I met people from Steppenwolf, Three Dog Night, Jim Croce.
Those were all part of the ABC Dunhill label.
Right.
And so you moved to Los Angeles to be able to work with this new conglomerate company.
They moved us out. I used to come out to the coast every 3-4 months. And I saw not only the weather, but the lifestyle was a lot slower, nicer. And they had an Orthodox shul in Beverly Hills, and they had day schools for kids. It was an attractive life.
What was different about it from the way that you were raising your kids in New York?
Well, we were sending our kids to day school, and but when we decided to go, a rabbi that we knew very well from Jackson Heights, he told us, when you get off the plane in Los Angeles, you can smell the licentiousness in the air. And he advised strongly about not going because there's no Yiddishkeit out in Los Angeles.
This was in the early 70s. Of course, by comparison to New York, it was very weak, but there was still always a sense of community ever since World War II and probably even before in LA. It just wasn't that strong, right?
Yeah, well, it was pretty strong. It got stronger as more and more people came to LA.
But Pico Boulevard didn't have any restaurants at that time. I think they only had a delicatessen on Pico, right?
Yeah. No, kosher was Pico Kosher Deli.
Right. And then, but there was
Beverly Boulevard.
A lot of stuff on Beverly Boulevard. Yeah, but it slowly grew. I mean, when we were growing up, there were very few choices as far as kosher dining and day schools and shuls, but there was always a sense of community, right?
Yeah.
Now, how did you maneuver, between your Orthodox lifestyle? I mean, you alluded to it before, but, someone in the music business and the entertainment business has to regularly go see clients who are generally performing many times on Friday nights in clubs, on Saturday nights. And how did you balance that? I mean, how were you able to maneuver through that?
Well, one thing I was still working for ABC, and my boss tried to reach me on Shabbos. And he was in England or something, and he had a question, which was he needed an answer. I was unavailable. And he really let me have it, telling me that if it happened again, I was finished. So that's the way it was.
But so how did you deal with that?
Well, shortly thereafter, I joined a law firm. I joined an existing law firm, opened up the West Coast office.
But so are you suggesting that the reason you left ABC Records was because your boss?
No, was one of the reasons.
Because I always remembered that ABC had been purchased but bought out by MCA, and you saw the writing on the wall that there was a whole change in administration.
Now, there was a change in administration. They fired the guy who was running ABC Dunhill, an accountant to run it, who immediately did business with just his former clients. And that was another reason to get out.
Okay. And
Daniel?
so yes, Jennifer, my sister would like to say something. Go ahead.
Okay. I don't know if you remember this like I do, Danny, but we used to think it was normal that we had a father who was going out at night to the Roxy and the Whiskey A Go-Go. And when we got to a certain age, we wanted to go too. He really didn't want to take us into that lifestyle. But I do remember when I was in 7th or 8th grade, Daddy took me to a televised New Year's Eve party where his client, Freddie Fender, was performing. And here's that picture.
Let me just see if we can bring up that picture, Jennifer, because I don't see you on the screen. Oh, here we go. Hold on just a second. I'm going to pin you. Here we go. So there's you, Jennifer, and Freddie Fender. Can you pan it out a little bit so we can see it more? There you go. All right, so that's my dad on the right, my sister on the left. And Freddie Fender, for those of you who are not into the Latino music scene in the 1970s, was a big sensation. Dad, was he signed with ABC Dunhill also?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I was instrumental in getting him.
I remember that. He loved you.
Well, let me just tell you this. I had a friend in the music business who was a producer, Huey Moe, who was based in Houston, Texas. And he produced a lot of country music. And he put out a record on Freddie called Before the Next Teardrop Falls.
Oh, I remember.
Okay, or Before the Next Teardrop Drops or something. I think it was Before the Next Teardrop Falls.
Falls, yeah.
It was a successful record in Texas. It was going crazy. And then ABC said they were going to try and sign him. But Freddie was signed to Huey Moe's production company. And I talked to Huey and I said, think of the best deal you want. Come to ABC, their country, their pop, their soul. They'll help you in all facets of the business. And they signed Freddie, and the record became #1 pop, #1 country, and #1 soul.
So it was a big success, thank God. So, but then shortly after you got out of ABC, they sort of sold out to MCA. They sort of went downhill and they disappeared, right? I mean, ABC Dunhill ceased to exist at some point.
Sold out, but look, the record business was starting to change in any event.
Is that because of technology?
Yes.
So now we're getting into the 80s where people are switching from LPs to cassettes and then eventually from cassettes to CDs. And we're getting to electronic recordings. And at what point did you start to realize that the music recording industry was starting to change dramatically?
Well, the record companies were going out of business. That's a clue.
So how did you as an entertainment lawyer stay afloat in that kind of industry, which was changing constantly?
There was still there's still music business going on.
Right.
It's just delivered differently.
Right. And there's concerts, there's live entertainment also that you can still.
I can tell you a funny story about Freddie Fender if you want to know.
Sure. Happy to listen to it.
Huey Moe told me this story about Freddie. That Freddie, when he became successful, bought a house with a swimming pool. And his wife came out one morning and saw steam in the swimming pool. And she thought the pool was on fire, so she called the fire department. It just happened to be a heated pool, that's all.
Okay. So Dad, tell us about some of the other celebrities that you've worked with or represented. You mentioned Freddie Fender. You talked about some of the recording artists that were under the ABC Dunhill label, Three Dog Night, Jim Croce, Steppenwolf. I remember Steely Dan. They were signed originally with ABC Dunhill.
Yeah.
And they had Three Dog Night and Steely Dan had some really major hits when you were the general counsel.
So did Steppenwolf.
Steppenwolf was already past their prime, I think, when they came on with ABC, right?
No. They had their big hit on ABC.
Oh, okay.
How about Johnny Cash?
Tell us about, that was later, Johnny Cash and Michael Jackson a little bit also. You want to tell us about that?
Well, we're jumping, but okay. Well, I was engaged by Cash's manager to help with an audit of CBS. And we helped with the audit, and I negotiated a new deal for John. And I did periodic work for him. Yeah, I became one of his lawyers. He was based out of Nashville, and I was in LA.
I remember you took me to a concert with Johnny and June Carter Cash when they played in LA.
Right.
How you would go? You went to a concert with him.
Yeah.
And who were some, and also when War was with ABC Dunhill. Remember that story?
No, it wasn't. War was with United Artists. When I was in private practice, I did some work for War.
And they had some of those major hits. Why Can't We Be Friends and Lowrider and Cisco Kid.
Yeah. And they got into a fracas that I was awakened at 3 o'clock in the morning. They were taken to jail, and I had the bail bondsman for them to get out of jail.
That was just like a domestic dispute, huh?
Yeah.
All right, but that's part of the experiences you had as a lawyer.
Yeah.
In the entertainment business.
Did
Did you have any problems collecting from some of the more flaky clientele?
Well, Megadeth, I had a problem with Megadeth.
So for those who don't know, tell us who Megadeth is or was.
For Megadeth, their first album with a major label, I got a deal for them with Capitol Records. And they wrote so many nice things about me on the cover. And then they got a new manager who thought they didn't need a lawyer because they were stars. And they came to me, they were ground zero.
So if anyone has the first Megadeth album, they'll be able to find you on the cover of the album, huh?
Yeah.
And just for those, for those who are a little bit more in a different genre of music, Megadeth is heavy metal, right? Which is not exactly something that we would expect our yeshiva boys and girls to be listening to.
Yeah.
But you also had hip hop artists that you represented, right?
Soul artists. I never got into rap.
Okay, which soul artists did you represent?
I'm trying to think now off the top of my head. What soul artist did I represent?
There was a guy named Rome.
Rome was one. He had a huge single hit with RCA, and then he disappeared.
All right, and then you also represented some famous jazz artists as well.
Yeah, Bob James, Foreplay, Keiko Matsui. I still represent them.
See, that's what they say is that old lawyers, they never retire, right? You just keep working until you're not working anymore, right?
Yeah.
All right, that's great. What do you prefer, Dad? Do you prefer parenting or grandparenting? Which gives you more joy? It's much less aggravation.
You get the pleasure without the aggravation.
Yeah. So, Dad, looking back on your career, as we start to wind it up, maybe if anyone who's on the Zoom call would like to submit a question, you're more than welcome to. But looking back on your career, any regrets or any things that you might have thought about doing differently, or anything notable that you'd like to share with us? How about being talk to us about being a parent, raising kids in two worlds, one in the Jewish world and one in the world of the recording industry in Hollywood.
Well, the home was stable. We made the house a place where the family was always foremost. I was not involved with Hollywood, so to speak, except professionally.
And you always made it home in time for candle lighting.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess, in other words,
calls sometimes.
What's that?
There were close calls where I just made it for Shabbos.
I remember, but you always did. And really sort of.
Curtis Mayfield, that was another soul artist.
Curtis Mayfield and he did the movie Superfly, and he did the recording,
with him on Superfly, but after that.
Okay, all right. Anyway, but the point is that you're sort of an example of how a person can be fully integrated in a completely secular profession that has to do with the arts and music and entertainment and comedy and motion pictures, and yet at the same time be a completely devoutly Orthodox Jew whose life is enriched by Yiddishkeit, is home every Shabbos, goes to shul, very involved with his community. I mean, that's sort of what you imparted over to us kids.
Well, that was our life, our lifestyle. Still is.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of what you shared with all of us. And I think to a very large extent, to each one of your three children, to one degree or another, have done our best to impart that on to our children, and now and eventually to our grandchildren as well. So I think you and Mommy have a lot to be proud of, to demonstrate that you can have one foot in each world, right?
Well, we're very proud of our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. First and foremost.
That's great. All right, I'm just going to see if there's any questions. Let's look at the chat. I see Paul asked the question, what about your children makes you most proud? That's what he would like to know.
what makes us most proud is the fact that they have a good home life in all their marriages, and that they are community oriented, and that they're all from, and their children are from, and their children's children are from.
Richie Idels, I think you said you have a question. I'll unmute you, Rich. Do you want to ask your question?
It's so fascinating, Mr. Korobkin. Thank you very much. So fascinating. Just a question: did your famous clients and such interesting? I'm sort of a musician myself, so I'm just fascinated by it. Were they aware of the fact that you were an Orthodox Jew, or did you, never try to, there's no reason why you would have to tell them necessarily, but and I'm sure, seeing pictures of you in those days and knowing how you are now, you were always ehrlich. But did that ever come into the equation? Did they, what sort of a Kiddush Hashem were you able to do? Or maybe they didn't even realize that you were Jewish.
No. They all knew I was Jewish and that they couldn't reach me over my Sabbath or over Jewish holidays. And they respected it. I thought they all respected it.
Did you ever, I remember growing up in our shul at Beth Jacob in Beverly Hills, and whenever the shul or NCSY or any of the other organizations needed someone to provide entertainment, they would invariably turn to you and to find someone, either a comedian or a singer or someone like that. Do you have any memorable experiences, any memories of that?
I have a memorable experience with the shul. We got Marty Allen, a comedian, for a shul dinner. And I mean, this is a Jewish guy. I explained to him this is an Orthodox shul, keep the material totally clean, no innuendos. Well, Marty was a nut, and he was funny as heck, but he started going off color. And the Rabbi Lamb got up and walked out.
By the way, Dad, that's not the only time that I remember. I remember you booked Jack Carter, also a Jewish comedian, for NCSY. And you told him, I remember going backstage with you, and I remember you telling him explicitly, we're Orthodox Jews, you got to keep it squeaky clean. And he said, oh, absolutely, I'll be totally clean. And then we get into the theater, and about halfway into the act, he just, I guess, comedians, when they see that they need to re-engage the audience, they start to go off color. And then all of the rabbis started to get up. I was in hysterical fits as a 14-year-old kid, but at the time it was hysterical, and it only added to the hysterics when all the rabbis started to get up and leave. But I guess you must have been a little bit embarrassed by the whole thing also.
Well, I was embarrassed, but what could you do? It was Jack Carter, it was Marty Allen.
Dad.
Yeah.
Remember you had that story with a born-again Christian guy. Was it Huey Moe? I'm not sure. It was a producer, and he said something about the second coming. You said, I'm waiting for the first coming. You're waiting for the second coming. We're both waiting for the same thing.
Yeah.
No, he wanted to buy him a gold bound.
Well, I have a story.
Go ahead, Dad.
I don't remember that incident, but I remember an incident where I represented people who produced an album of sermons by big televangelists. And the clients wanted to buy this televangelist for his business. something. So they suggested a gold bound Bible.
Oh,
He responded, how about a gold bar, a bullion? And they got him that.
so the televangelist was offered the gold-bound Bible, and he took the gold bullion instead.
Right.
Sounds like he was a smart businessman. Maybe I could learn from him. I'm not sure, but in any event, anyway, Dad, I know that your grandkids probably want to see you today, the ones that are in LA. But I just want to thank you deeply for taking this time. I want to thank Mommy for helping you with helping you reminisce some of the experiences you've had. And I just feel bad that I haven't been able to get out to LA in the past few months to be able to go see you and Mommy. It's during a pandemic. Even if I were to show up, I couldn't even come into the house.
No. We haven't been out of the house in 3 months, except, to walk in LA with our masks on.
All right. Well, it's great to see you, Dad. I wish you continued good health, and Hashem should give you lots of blessing and nachas to you and Mom. And I want to thank you very much for spending Father's Day with me. Thank you. It means a lot. And I love you, Dad, and I love you too, Mom. And we hope to see you soon for really good things.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Thanks, Mom.
It was lovely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Take care.